Welcome to the dark and brutal world of medieval torture devices, where pain was not just an instrument of punishment, but a grotesque art form perfected over centuries. Picture yourself walking through the shadowy chambers of a medieval dungeon, the air thick with the echoes of suffering and the metallic scent of fear. These were places where human ingenuity turned toward its darkest purposes, creating implements of agony that would make even the strongest souls tremble. In medieval times, torture was not merely about extracting confessions or delivering justice. It was about breaking the human spirit, demonstrating absolute power, and sending a chilling message to anyone who dared defy authority. The devices used were as varied as they were horrifying, each one designed with meticulous attention to maximizing suffering while keeping the victim alive as long as possible. The rack, perhaps the most infamous of all torture devices, was deceptively simple in its construction, yet devastatingly effective in its purpose. This wooden frame with ropes and pulleys could stretch a human body beyond its natural limits, slowly dislocating joints and tearing muscles. Victims would be strapped down, their wrists and ankles bound to opposite ends of the device. As the torturer turned the wheel, the victim's body would be pulled in opposite directions, creating an excruciating sensation that would begin as discomfort and escalate to unbearable agony. What made the rack particularly terrifying was its gradual nature. Unlike quick methods of execution, the rack prolonged suffering, allowing torturers to extract confessions bit by bit. The psychological torment was often worse than the physical pain, as victims could see and hear the mechanism that would eventually tear their bodies apart. Many confessed to crimes they never committed simply to escape the promise of continued stretching. The Iron Maiden stands as another monument to medieval cruelty, though its actual historical use remains debated among scholars. This upright sarcophagus, lined with iron spikes, was designed to enclose a victim completely. The spikes were allegedly positioned to pierce vital organs slowly, ensuring a prolonged and agonizing death. Whether real or legend, the Iron Maiden represents the medieval fascination with devices that combined confinement with physical torture. The thumbscrew, also known as the pillywinks, was a smaller but no less effective instrument of torture. This device consisted of metal plates connected by screws that could be tightened around a victim's thumbs or fingers. As pressure increased, bones would crack and flesh would be crushed. The beauty of this device, from a torturer's perspective, was its precision. It could apply exactly the amount of pressure needed to cause maximum pain without immediately killing the victim. Waterboarding, though often associated with modern interrogation techniques, has its roots in medieval torture practices. Known then as the water torture or tormenta de agua, this method involved forcing water into a victim's mouth and nose to simulate drowning. The psychological effect was devastating, as victims experienced the terror of imminent death while remaining conscious throughout the ordeal. The strappado represented another ingenious method of combining gravity with human anatomy to create suffering. Victims would have their hands tied behind their backs and then be hoisted into the air by a rope attached to their wrists. The full weight of their body would hang from their shoulders, causing immediate dislocation and excruciating pain. Some variations included dropping the victim suddenly, causing additional trauma to already damaged joints. The wheel of torture, also known as the breaking wheel, was reserved for the most serious crimes. Victims would be tied to a large wooden wheel and beaten with hammers or iron bars until their bones were systematically broken. The process could take hours, with torturers carefully avoiding fatal blows until the very end. Sometimes, victims would be left on the wheel to die slowly from their injuries, serving as a gruesome warning to others. The pear of anguish was a particularly sadistic device designed for specific types of punishment. This metal instrument, shaped like a pear, could be inserted into various body openings and then expanded by turning a screw. The device would tear internal tissues and cause internal bleeding, often leading to a slow and painful death. Different versions were used for different crimes, adding a symbolic element to the physical torture. Branding irons served dual purposes in medieval torture chambers. Not only did they inflict immediate searing pain, but they also marked victims permanently, ensuring their shame would follow them for life. The smell of burning flesh and the sound of sizzling skin created an atmosphere of terror that affected not just the victim, but anyone who witnessed the procedure. The Judas Cradle was perhaps one of the most psychologically torturous devices ever conceived. Victims would be positioned above a pyramid-shaped seat and slowly lowered onto its point. The torturer could control the speed of descent, making the process last for hours or even days. The pointed seat would gradually penetrate the victim's body, causing internal damage while the weight of their own body ensured continued suffering. Medieval torturers understood that the mind was often more fragile than the body. Many devices were designed as much to terrorize as to harm. The mere sight of these instruments, often displayed prominently in dungeons and torture chambers, was enough to break the will of many prisoners before any physical torture began. The creaking of wooden mechanisms, the glint of metal spikes, and the bloodstains on well-used devices all contributed to an atmosphere of hopelessness and dread. The cat-o'-nine tails, while primarily a tool of flogging, represents the medieval understanding of prolonged suffering. This whip, with its multiple leather strands often tipped with metal, could flay skin from bone stroke by stroke. The number of lashes could be precisely controlled, allowing torturers to keep victims conscious and suffering for extended periods. Head crushers were designed to apply gradual pressure to a victim's skull, starting with the jaw and working upward. As the device tightened, teeth would crack, the jaw would break, and eventually the skull itself would begin to fracture. The slow progression of damage allowed torturers to extract confessions at various stages of the process. The brazen bull, though originating in ancient times, found renewed use during medieval periods. This bronze statue of a bull could be heated while containing a victim inside. As the metal grew hot, the person trapped within would be slowly roasted alive. Acoustic properties of the bull were designed to transform the victim's screams into sounds resembling the bellowing of an actual bull. Medieval torture chambers were not random collections of sadistic devices, but carefully orchestrated theatres of pain. Torturers were often skilled craftsmen who understood human anatomy and psychology. They knew exactly how much pressure to apply, how long to sustain particular torments, and when to offer false hope of mercy. The goal was not simply to kill, but to break the human spirit completely. The garrote represented a more refined approach to torture and execution. This device, consisting of a collar connected to a screw mechanism, could be tightened gradually around a victim's neck. Unlike hanging, which might offer a quick death, the garrote ensured slow strangulation, allowing time for last-minute confessions, or simply prolonging the agony for the entertainment of spectators. Fire was perhaps the most primal and terrifying element in the medieval torturer's arsenal. Beyond simple burning, medieval practitioners developed sophisticated methods of applying heat to maximize suffering. Heated metal objects could be applied to specific body parts, creating precise burns that would heal slowly and painfully. The threat of fire was often as effective as its actual application. The ducking stool served dual purposes as both torture device and public humiliation tool. Suspected witches or other accused individuals would be strapped to a chair and repeatedly dunked in water. If they survived, it might be taken as proof of their guilt, requiring further torture. If they drowned, they were posthumously declared innocent. This no-win situation exemplified the twisted logic of medieval justice. Medieval society's relationship with torture was complex and deeply ingrained in its legal and social structures. Torture was not seen as barbaric, but as a necessary tool for maintaining order and discovering truth. The elaborate nature of many devices suggests that considerable time, money, and craftsmanship were invested in perfecting the art of inflicting pain. The executioner's sword, while primarily an instrument of death, played an important role in medieval torture as well. The threat of decapitation could be used to extract confessions, while partial cuts could serve as torture in their own right. The skill required to wield such weapons effectively meant that executioners held specialized positions in medieval society. Stocks and pillories, while less immediately life-threatening than other devices, created their own form of prolonged torture through public humiliation and physical discomfort. Victims locked in these devices would be exposed to the elements and the cruelty of passers-by for hours or days. The inability to move, combined with public mockery and sometimes physical abuse from crowds, created a psychological torture that could be as devastating as any physical device. The medieval period's approach to torture reflected broader social attitudes about pain, justice, and human nature. In a world where life was often brutal and short, the infliction of suffering was seen as a natural part of maintaining social order. The elaborate nature of torture devices suggests that medieval society had developed torture into something approaching an art form, with practitioners who took pride in their craft and innovations. As we reflect on these dark chapters of human history, we're reminded of the capacity for both cruelty and ingenuity that exists within our species. The medieval torture devices that once filled dungeons across Europe serve as sobering reminders of what happens when power goes unchecked and when the value of human life is diminished. These instruments of agony, crafted with the same skill and attention to detail as the period's great cathedrals and works of art, reveal a civilization capable of both transcendent beauty and unspeakable horror. The legacy of medieval torture extends far beyond the physical devices themselves. The psychological techniques developed during this period influenced interrogation methods for centuries to come. The understanding that fear and anticipation could be as powerful as physical pain became a cornerstone of coercive practices that persisted long after the last rack was dismantled. Today, these devices exist primarily in museums and historical displays, serving as educational tools rather than instruments of suffering. Yet their impact on human consciousness remains profound, reminding us of the importance of human rights, due process, and the protection of the vulnerable from those who would abuse power. The brutal efficiency of medieval torture devices stands as a testament to human ingenuity turned toward its darkest purposes, a reminder that civilization's greatest achievements and its most shameful chapters often emerge from the same capacity for innovation and creation that defines our species.